Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for coming to watch. We got guys an update on a major pattern flip that is expected to bring Arctic air into the northern United States, which could also bring the chances for our first snow of the season in some spots. Got all the details coming right up, right? So, thanks for joining me here on this Wednesday evening. We have a lot to talk about in this video, so we're going to be going over again all the latest details on this major pattern flip that is about to occur as we get into the later portion of this week and eventually into this weekend. We could be talking about some significant Arctic air in the northern United States that could actually lead to some snowfall. So once again, we will be going into a deep dive on why that's going to be happening and which areas may be affected. But if we take a look here, starting out with your current radar, you can see we have two things going on. One, we do have a storm system work its way up here in the Pacific Northwest. It has been producing some showers and thunderstorms today, and we actually did have a tornado warning, I believe, in Oregon State. So that was interesting stuff there. So there is still a very small severe weather threat with those. Obviously, the main threat hazard would be an embedded tornado or two, so make sure, again, multiple ways receive warnings just in case you do get put under a tornado warning. However, it is very, very unlikely, but not impossible, because, again, we've already seen that happen at least once today. We also do have another storm system working its way up here in the northeast. This is associated with a strong cold front that's working its way across the New England states. You can see it's producing some heavy showers and thunderstorms. It's actually popped off a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings, and on radar it doesn't look too impressive. But the reason why we have the severe thunderstorm warnings is because the embedded wind gusts are going to be much stronger, okay? We're talking about wind gusts of up to 60 miles per hour in some spots. We do have a couple high wind warnings up in these areas, so we'll have to talk about that in the next couple of minutes. But otherwise, the country looks great, and the central United States should actually stay dry for quite a long time. So we'll have to also talk about that in a future update and kind of what impacts that will bring just with, again, the lack of rainwater. Alright, but if we take a look now at your current alerts, you can see, once again, not much going on, but if you look at the west coast of the United States, we do have winter storm warnings up for portions of northern Washington state here. In those pink shades, so anybody really off to the extreme northeast of Seattle is where we do have some of those winter storm warnings, so very heavy snow is expected up there, and we also do have some wind advisories going out for portions of northern Nevada back into the interior mountains of California, Sierra Mountains. We do also have some high wind warnings in there, so again, some very gusty winds out into that region. But if you slide things over here to our northeast states, you can see we do have widespread wind advisories going out for all of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, most of New York State, eastern and central Pennsylvania, all of New Jersey, back into northern Delmarva. Again, anywhere in that tan shade, this is what we're talking about. Those wind advisories also back up into portions of central and southern Vermont and New Hampshire. Okay, so again, this is what we're talking about, the chance for seeing wind gusts of up to 55 miles per hour, and even we do have some high wind warnings in those gold shades. This is where we're talking about wind gusts of up to 60 miles per hour expected. So again, that cold front is what's driving all of these damaging winds, but it's definitely already packed a punch, and it's just getting its way across the New England states as we speak right now. So again, very significant wind gusts are expected throughout this evening into tomorrow morning. So, speaking of those winds, we look at now our NAM 3K model for our projected reflectivity. We're going to be taking a look at the hour-by-hour outlook for this storm. So, this is the latest 18Z, or actually, this is the OOZ NAM. You can see, again, this is your surface low that's bringing all of this cold air and also all of this wind into the New England states. Let me change my pen colors so you can see that better. But again, sub 1,000 millibar low pressure system, definitely relatively strong there. So you can see, again, as we get into the night, that cold front will continue to advance off to the southeast, again, work its way out towards the coastline. I do want to note up here into portions of central and northern Maine, we will be talking about a period of likely moderate to heavy snowfall with some mixing issues a little bit farther to the southwest. Okay, that is definitely going to be dropping quite a bit of snow. Very wet and very heavy snowfall. Again, just where that 540 line lays, okay, that's where our cold air is going to be. That's where our, sub-freezing air is going to be, and that's going to allow for some very heavy snowfall to accumulate. So, again, a period of very heavy snowfall is looking possible and looking likely out here in central and northern Maine, again, for several hours there. Before the storm begins to move off to the east. But as we wake up tomorrow morning, all of the snow should be gone. There could be some leftover light snow or flurries on the backside, but again, most of the precipitation should be moving out. For folks down south, it looks like for the most part we're going to see light to moderate rainfall with some pockets of heavy rainfall embedded within the line, again with the strongest parts. But it will continue to move off to the east, again riding where that cold front is going to be, likely producing strong to damaging winds on the backside once this cold front and all that cold air takes over. But really not going to be too much of an impactful storm as far as the precipitation goes. I really would be most worried about Maine, obviously, with the slick travel and slick roads, but otherwise it's just going to be kind of a rainy night into the morning hours. But really by late tomorrow morning, everything should be cleared up and out of your way. So, speaking of those winds, these are your 10-meter wind gusts here off of the NAM 3K model. So this is basically your surface wind gusts. And you can see, again, as soon as that cold front moves through, we're going to be talking about likely a period of significant damaging winds, potentially over 40 miles per hour in some of these areas. We have been seeing, again, embedded spots of up to 60 mile per hour damaging winds. Also, just in general with those high wind warnings, but also especially with those parts of the lines that are getting severe thunderstorm warnings. Again, they're not getting those warnings because of how impressive the radar signature is. However, they are getting those warnings because when we do see a stronger part of that line, we know the outflow winds are going to be stronger. So because that's a stronger bit of the line, we know that the winds could be a little bit higher in that one confined area. So that's why we are talking about, again, isolated spots of up to 60 mile per hour winds. But kind of the general consensus here is that we'll see likely a gusty overnight to morning period here, with wind gusts ranging from 35 all the way up to 50 miles per hour. And you can see all the way down here in southern New England, especially Long Island, we could be talking about a pocket of winds, again, getting up to 50 miles per hour anywhere in that red shade. But it's going to be pretty gusty as we get into tomorrow morning. Again, these winds won't really subside until late tomorrow as that cold front really officially moves through. But you're still going to be talking about wind gusts of up to 30 miles per hour, again, as we get into the evening hours and start winding down by tomorrow evening. And then once again, really by Friday, everything should be good until our next storm system moves in. Alright, so that's going to take care of what our latest storm system is going to be doing out here for folks in New England. But now we look at the GFS 18Z run. We're going to be looking at the next couple of days, potentially the next couple of weeks here, at what we could be talking about for our upcoming pattern, what kind of storm systems we may need to watch out for. So this is the latest 18Z GFS. Again, you can see our storm system moves out of the northeast, but it does leave behind another low-pressure system that is currently riding the jet stream here, moving up into the very high plains all the way up towards the border, and it kind of acts as a clipper system, just sub 1000 millibars here at this point. But you can see it is starting to produce some snowfall just north of the U.S.-Canadian border, and it is starting to produce some precipitation on the south side of where that low-pressure system is. You can see that at this point it's really taking on a negative tilt, that trough, and it does bring some precipitation into the Great Lakes region in the northeast. However, the cold air is not far enough south where we see snowfall with this, where the majority of areas impacted by the precipitation, you likely will get rain, but that eventually moves off to the east. Then you get a second piece of energy to move down with the jet stream, which in this point you are starting to get very cold air to creep down into the central United States. Again, this is kind of the most far south that the cold air and the 540 line has gotten at this point. But you have very strong high pressure up here that's obviously bringing all that cold air in, and with it in front of that you have this surface low. It's very weak. It's only 1004 millibars, but there is a piece of energy strong enough to actually bring some precipitation once again into the upper Midwest. We actually do see, again, much more cold air in place here, much farther south, and that allows for some snowfall to actually occur out here, again, in the Midwest and across the Great Lakes region. So places like Chicago, Milwaukee, you guys would be getting some snowfall with this system. Again, it's not entirely snow, but it does begin to move off to the northeast, and it does eject right up into, or through the jet stream, I should say, and into Canada off to the north, and it does finally take on that extreme negative tilt. And at this point, you have a huge dip in the jet stream, okay? Behind this, it's going to allow for so much cold air to just to just come pouring down into the eastern United States. And at this point, you have an absolute full-on Arctic blast, again, working its way deep into the eastern United States. You have that 540 line all the way down to the Gulf Coast, okay? We do not usually see that in early November. This is definitely, unusually cold air. Now, this is not an early sign of winter being, insane. This is not us saying, because we're getting cold air so early, that doesn't mean that we're going to get an extreme winter. That just means that, things are starting to really kick into high gear. But as that low pressure system continues to move off to the north, we will actually, again, see that cold air wrap in on the backside, which could allow for, again, lingering energy to produce some lake effect snow. And we actually see a very strong signal for that as we're getting to around November 10th, which would be Monday of next week. We do get some moderate to heavy lake effect snow across the Great Lakes region, really all of the Great Lakes starting to produce some lake effect snow there. And really, it's all that lingering energy that allows us to pick up, again, a couple, additional inches of snow past that storm system. So at this point, we're getting pretty much halfway through our run. We're getting into November 15th, which is about 10 days out from now. So we're getting pretty far out, but we still can be talking about some storm signals here from the GFS. And we have a much stronger piece of energy, already 985 millibars. So this is a very strong surface low that's working down likely what seems to be another big shot of cold air into the northern United States. And this does get its act together, and we do see kind of a low pressure system handoff happen. And once again, you get another significant Arctic blast to work lots of cold air down into the eastern and central United States. And then you get a very strong low pressure system to absolutely rip up these winds out here across the east coast of the United States. And we do see, obviously, a major storm system there. I mean, that would cause lots of problems, but that would bring much more widespread snow, and this would be the one scenario that would actually work for a lot of areas to see snow in the northern U.S. You have a huge blast of cold air. Now, the problem with the other system was that, we did get a little bit of precipitation, but it just wasn't strong enough to produce, again, widespread precipitation and enough precipitation for it to interact with the cold air. This time, we have a much more significant, again, robust storm system that's covering a huge chunk of the East Coast here, and you have plenty of cold air nearby. So this is just causing the perfect recipe here for quite a bit of snowfall across some areas. And you can see up here into portions of New England, we do get a strong signal for snowfall, and that system just roars off to the east there again, wrapping around lots of energy. And that, at this point, we're getting into La La Land, but that is a very strong signal again of a consistent pattern of significant Arctic blasts, but also a couple of major and significant storm systems. Again, we cannot rule that out for the eastern United States. Again, it looks like the western United States is going to stay relatively dry over the next couple of days, other than obviously the Pacific Northwest, just because that's what our jet stream or our general flow is looking like. Again, storm systems are going to be riding up here through the Pacific Northwest, then dipping down through the northern tier of the country back into the Northeast. That's going to mean that the desert Southwest and the Central Plains are going to stay very, very dry. Again, high pressure is going to dominate the region. You're going to get very above average temperatures likely with this scenario. Alright, so this is almost similar to a classic negative NAO phase. Again, if this were in winter, the same pattern that we're dealing with now, again, that would just be a more extreme case of what we're dealing with now. So think of what it would be like in winter. Again, you'd have much more widespread cold air and just, snowstorm after snowstorm. So again, this is just an overall very favorable pattern for very cold air, and obviously some areas to see some pretty significant snowfall potentially, again, as we get deeper into November. So that was the latest GFS. Now we'll look at the European model. We're going to be looking at today's 12Z just so we can get the full 360 hours on this run. So you can see as we continue to put this run in motion, again, pretty similar to what the GFS is showing. It also does like that signal of the next storm system moving through. It is around 992 millibars, so relatively strong there. It tries to get its act together, but doesn't really do much. Again, not enough cold air nearby to produce some snowfall, so it's all rain for our folks out here in the Midwest and into the Ohio Valley Northeast, so no snow for any of our folks out there. It also does follow up with that storm with a new low pressure system that is much weaker but much more compact, and it does bring down a lot of cold air. It does show the same scenario as the GFS. You can see that high pressure system bring all of that cold air down, and you get heavy snow across portions of Wisconsin and especially into Michigan here. These Great Lakes regions really getting battered by heavy snowfall. And just north of the Great Lakes region, I mean, you are talking about, again, a significant shield of heavy, we're talking moderate to heavy snowfall, a thumping of snow out here just north of the U.S.-Canadian border. And that is all thanks to this huge Arctic blast that, again, the GFS and now the European model are all agreeing on, which could really cause a significant dip in our jet stream, but could just bring a lot of below average temperatures into the northern United States. And then this takes on an extreme negative tilt, bringing lots of precipitation and wind up into the eastern seaboard. And eventually that storm system begins to move out, but it does bring, once again, lingering energy for the potential for backside lake effect snow. So that is another thing that we need to watch out for, with both the GFS and the European model agreeing on that. Now, finally, we're getting into this kind of zone where we're unsure and unclear about what our third storm system potentially could be looking like. But the GFS and the European model also agree on some sort of robust system to develop right around the 17th to the 20th across the central United States. Now, the GFS had this much farther north, all the way up towards, where the 540 line meets the 552 line here, which is where the cold front meets the warm air. But the European model wants this much farther south, actually originating in the central United States. And the storm system continues to move off to the east, but it fails to fully develop, okay? It produces likely a significant severe weather event across here in the central plains. So too far out to really talk about a, signal for severe weather, but definitely there is a signal for a strong storm system. But I think because of all this high pressure nearby, you really don't have enough cold air, this thing just can't get supported, and it fizzles out completely as it moves off to the east, and then that's that. Alright, so that's a very good example, in my opinion, of not trusting, everything you see past 250 hours out. Again, models get very, very kind of unrealistic and unreliable past 200 hours, basically, alright? So after 200 hours, after a week out or so, that's when models start to get a little bit crazy and show pretty wild scenarios. Now, I'm not saying that it's entirely impossible that we see something like the GFS. However, I do think that a major difference in what we actually see and, towards what we actually see on this run, I think there will be a major difference there, alright? So, still a lot to be figured out, but again, nonetheless, a very active pattern is ahead, and it looks like we're going to get quite a bit of cold air and potentially quite a bit of snowfall in some areas. But we now look at the 2-meter temperature anomaly from the GFS, and this is going to give us an idea of how far below average our temperatures are going to get with this incoming Arctic air. And you can see the AT&T GFS, again, sticking with the idea of a very robust cold front here. This brings well below average temperatures all the way down to the Gulf Coast. You're talking about potentially up to 12 degrees below average. Again, that's not 12 degrees below zero, but a huge Arctic blast bringing temperatures already down to around 10 degrees below average, all the way into the central and eastern United States, and that continues to move off to the east. Again, at some point, it does actually get very intense, bringing temperatures closer to 20 degrees below average for all of the central and eastern United States. So that is a very, very significant pattern flip. Again, you go from above average to quickly to below average temperatures across all of the eastern United States. And then, as expected, the west gets a surge of warm air, and high pressure dominates the region. Again, bringing troughing and low pressure into the eastern United States, with the west staying very warm and very dry. So that's a classic positive PNA, negative NAO phase that we usually see during late fall and winter seasons. Again, just favoring much more colder conditions and, more active storm track out here in the central and eastern United States. And then about that second cold blast, again, we saw that on the GFS. At this point, again, we're getting pretty far out. But if we were to take a little sneak peek at what the GFS wants for that second cold blast, again, it shows a pretty similar scenario happening, where we get temperatures below average temperatures very far into the central and eastern United States, but at this point we're getting very, very far out. So, speaking of that cold air, we take a look now at your wind chill and heat index off the 18Z GFS. So this gives us an idea of how cold it's actually going to feel like with that cold air, coming down from Canada. And you can see that's going to be very, very cold, potentially even frigid in some spots across the northern United States. Look at these wind chills out here across portions of the high plains and the upper Midwest. You're talking about potentially real feels, what it feels like outside, wind chills in the single digits across a huge chunk of the northern United States. You're seeing wind chills into the teens and, again, potentially below 10 degrees. All the way out here into the Great Lakes region, the upper Midwest, and the Great Plains, and you're already getting well below freezing temperatures across the interior Northeast, again, with this major Arctic blast moving through. And at this point, this is when it's going to get most significant, with all that cold air getting all the way down to potentially the Florida Panhandle. Look at this. You're getting temperatures in the northern 20s out here, wind chills into the northern 20s out here in northern Florida. And you're just getting very, very cold conditions out here in the northern United States. Again, the Northeast getting hit very, very hard by this, with pretty extreme wind chills, at least for early November standards. But there's a chance we could see temperatures, wind chills near zero across portions of the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Montana. So really, any extreme northern areas out here in the northern tip of the country does have a shot at seeing, again, temperatures, or I should say wind chills into the single digits and potentially around 0 degrees. So very, very significant cold air is moving in. Again, this is going to be so far likely the most significant amount and just, cold air that we have seen since last winter. So again, this is a very significant blast of cold air that we are tracking here off of both the GFS and the European model. Now, look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlooks. This is valid for November 11th to 15th, when that cold front's going to be working its way into the eastern United States. This is just another way of looking at the signal we were talking about. Again, negative NAO in the east, positive PNA in the west. You get, again, very high pressure and above average temperatures to build out there in the western United States and even into the central United States, which could, again, lead to the potential for a drought to occur. And then you get below average temperatures out here into the eastern United States, with the entire East Coast, again, seeing a likely chance of below average temperatures as we get from the 11th to the 15th. And then, again, you can even see all the way up into Alaska, we still are talking about above average temperatures. So, again, the entire kind of western half of North America is going to be talking about around relatively above average temperatures, while the eastern half is going to be likely much more below average with this significant Arctic blast. Now we look at the 300 millibar height winds here. So this is basically going to give us an idea of how strong our jet stream is going to be, our jet stream pattern. This is where our jet stream is located, again, very, very high up in the atmosphere. This is where the 300 millibar height level is going to be. But you can see, again, as we put this in motion, you can see that big dip in the jet stream is already taking place. You have a very amplified jet streak out here across portions of the central United States. But watch as that trough begins to work its way down farther and farther into the central and eastern United States, and it all gets all the way down to the southern United States. I mean, look at that progression there. Again, this is a huge, we're talking about a massive dip in the jet stream. Pretty much your jet stream takes a complete plummet south and then kind of peaks, or kind of, ends at a low point of the Gulf Coast here, and then races back up, shoots back up into the northeastern United States. So that would call for, again, a very amplified jet streak for not only our folks out here in the Midwest, but especially up here in the East Coast. This would bring huge wind gusts into all of the East Coast. Again, when you have a jet stream of, 160 knots, that is extremely impressive. You're getting very high up on the scale. We usually don't see a jet stream this, active and amplified this early in the season. But, again, extremely intense dip in the jet stream. This is going to bring down huge amounts of cold air. Again, funneling tons of cold air Arctic air into the northern United States, well, you get this massive ridge to build into the west. This is how your jet stream is going to be working. This is not a zonal flow. This is the opposite of a zonal flow. Again, this is going to bring a very, very active pattern when you get an unsettled jet stream like this, where literally the United States is split in half. The west is talking about a huge ridge, while the east is talking about a huge dip in the jet stream. So storms are going to have to ride this huge wave of energy basically in the top part of our atmosphere, and it's going to be very amplified, meaning very, very strong. So the winds aloft are going to be moving very, very quickly and very, very strong. And again, that's just going to lead to likely some very unsettled weather over the next couple of weeks. And we do have a signal for another similar dip in the jet stream, again, as we get deeper and deeper into November. So very active times are ahead for the eastern United States. And another way we can look at this is off the 500 millibar height anomalies off the GFS. So again, this gives us an idea of where our troughing and where our high pressure ridging is going to be. This is a great way to look at what our pattern is looking like. Again, kind of mirroring what we looked at with the Climate Prediction Center's outlook, but especially with our jet stream. Again, you can see that huge trough digging down pretty deep into the Ohio Valley and the eastern United States, while this trough really, that ridge really starts to build out here in the west. Again, bring very strong high pressure blocking out there into all of the western and west central United States, leading to very below average precipitation and above average temperatures, while you get, again, lots of cold air to get funneled down straight into the eastern United States. That's what your jet stream is going to look like, again, in a matter of days. By the 11th to the 12th, we're going to have a completely different pattern. Again, this is a very unsettled pattern that we're looking at, but I really do think that this is going to lead to some significant cold air and some very significant storm systems to at least move into the United States. But for the last part of the update, we're going to be looking at the European model for our snow totals. And we were looking at that storm system, that small piece of energy that could bring a couple inches of snow to the Midwest, and there was actually a pretty significant signal for that. You can see, especially across portions of southern Wisconsin into northern Illinois, portions of even northeastern Iowa, there's a signal for 1 to 3 inches of snow potentially. Again, still a lot to be figured out, but over the next several days, once that storm system moves in and drops some snowfall, we could be talking about a couple inches of snow, and there's a solid signal for potentially up to 2 to 4 inches out here in the Chicago suburbs. So that's interesting to look at. But if you're around Chicago, we could be talking about several inches of snow potentially with this upcoming piece of energy. And look at Michigan. Okay, over the next couple of days, Michigan could get hit by lots of snowfall here, where you have a huge signal for, again, 5+ inches of snowfall. So there is a very solid signal for snow across the Ohio Valley, again, all the way back down here into West Virginia, southern Ohio, Indiana. You're still talking about potentially 2 to 4 inches of snow over the next couple of days and the next week or so. And even the Northeast, the interior Northeast, there's that lake effect snow signal. Again, several inches of snow looking possible all the way from Maine down through the interior Northeast over the next couple of days. All that cold air is certainly going to lead to the chance for seeing quite a bit of snowfall as we get deeper and deeper into November, right? So that's going to wrap up the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to go hit the like and subscribe button. Also, please consider donating if you haven't already. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you for coming to watch. See you guys in the next video.